Dave Whitman was a striking figure, with wavy chestnut hair, piercing blue eyes, and a strong athletic build that could make anyone take a second glance. At just 25, he was wealthy beyond most people's imaginations, all thanks to an innovative startup he had built from the ground up. Despite his success, he felt an emptiness gnawing at him, a void that neither money, luxury nor privilege could fill. As the son of two ambitious parents who rarely had time for deep relationships, he understood the weight of superficial connections. Growing up, Dave had always been intrigued by his grandfather's stories of Africa, tales of communities where people held deep values, where family bonds were sacred, and where love was unburdened by material wealth. So, when it came time for him to consider marriage, he took a radical step, one that seemed bizarre even to himself. He would seek out true love in an African village, far removed from his comfortable, affluent world. This way, Dave reasoned, he could find someone who loved him for who he was, rather than what he had. But to truly gauge the sincerity of people's hearts, he would have to live as an ordinary man, concealing his wealth and status. With a small backpack and a plan to disguise himself as a modest traveler, Dave arrived in the village of Makoji. It was a quiet but lively place, tucked between rolling hills and winding dirt paths, and populated by warm-hearted people who thrived on simplicity. Dave stood out immediately as the only foreigner in sight. His plan to blend in was easier said than done, as nearly everyone he met regarded him with curiosity and interest. Many of the young women of Makoji were fascinated by his presence, and Dave quickly felt their gazes linger on him as he walked through the narrow streets. He noticed them as they took extra care of their appearance whenever he was nearby. Though amused, he also felt the weight of his decision to mask his wealth. It became clear that he needed to observe carefully to find a woman who valued him for more than what they assumed he possessed. On a humid Wednesday morning, Dave decided to explore the bustling local market. The marketplace was a lively stretch, filled with an array of colorful stalls and the scent of fresh produce, spices, and cooking fires filling the air. Here, people traded everything from woven baskets to smoked fish, and most of the townspeople seemed to know each other well. Dave strolled along, unnoticed amid the trading and haggling, observing the vibrant community around him. As he scanned the area, his eyes fell upon a particular stall. There, amid rows of hanging meats, was a young woman with the most captivating face he had ever seen. She was seated behind her stall, carefully arranging her wares. Her dark, smooth skin glowed in the morning sun, and her striking beauty was impossible to ignore. However, as he took a closer look, he noticed something he had not seen earlier. The lady was crippled, her legs weak and unable to support her fully. The wheelchair she sat in was both her seat and her only means of mobility. Her name, he would later find out, was Chima. Dave felt an inexplicable draw toward her. She looked graceful and poised, handling her work with a serene strength. Unlike the other women who glanced his way, Chima seemed to focus entirely on her work, showing zero sign of intrigue or distraction by his presence. He felt a growing desire to know her story. With a smile, Dave approached her stall. "Good morning," he greeted, his tone friendly. Chima looked up, her eyes warm yet guarded. "Morning, sir. What can I get for you?" "I'd like some meat," Dave replied, pretending to consider his choices while truly wanting an excuse to linger. She packed a modest portion and handed it over to him. Their interaction was brief, but Dave walked away with a sense of admiration. She was beautiful, certainly, But there was something more. A quiet resilience in her eyes that stirred something in him. He decided that he would return to the market the following day, hoping to see her again. The next day, Dave found himself back at the marketplace, though this time he kept his distance, observing her from a shaded corner. He watched as Chima managed her store, interacting with customers and working tirelessly despite her limitations. Her graceful movements and patient demeanor were magnetic, and it was clear that her disability did little to hinder her spirit. As the sun dipped lower in the sky and the other vendors began packing up for the day, Dave approached Chima once more. He had already bought his share of meat from her that morning, so she regarded him with a raised eyebrow when he offered to help her pack up. "Hi there, I'd love to help you out." I don't need help, sir," Chima said firmly, her tone polite yet distant. "I bought from you earlier, remember?" Chima sighed, clearly a bit worried but ultimately nodding her acceptance. Together, they packed up her goods, and as they did, Dave realized just how challenging the task was for her. She managed everything on her own, relying on her upper body strength and creative ways to adapt to the limitations imposed by her condition. Once they were finished packing, he offered to push her wheelchair back home. Chima hesitated, eyeing him cautiously. "Why are you doing this?" Dave shrugged, trying to appear casual. "I just want to help." "And why exactly do you want to help out?" Chima asked, feeling a little bit suspicious. "Chima, I honestly just want to help out," Dave responded. "How do you even know my name?" Chima asked, feeling more suspicious now. I overheard one of your customers mention it this morning when I came to buy meat. I understand if you don't feel comfortable around me since I am a stranger, but I genuinely want to help," Dave responded once more. With some reluctance, she allowed him to wheel her through the village, leading him down a path that took them away from the market bustle and into a quiet shaded area where her modest house stood. Chima reluctantly thanked him and Dave took his leave. That evening, they didn't speak much, but it was enough for Dave to feel the weight of his growing intrigue and admiration for Chima. As the days passed, their small exchanges turned into brief conversations. Dave continued visiting the market daily, assisting her at closing time and walking her home. She gradually became more open, showing subtle appreciation for his consistent help. However, she remained guarded, and Dave could sense an underlying sadness in her that she rarely let show. One evening, after they had packed up her store, Dave took a bold step and asked Chima if she would tell him more about herself. Specifically, Dave was interested in knowing how Chima ended up in a wheelchair. Her eyes grew distant, and for a moment, he feared he had overstepped. "It's a long story, Dave," Chima finally said, her voice tinged with both sorrow and strength. "I have all the time in the world, Chima," he replied softly. And so, with the quietness of the evening as their backdrop, Chima told him her tale. She spoke of her parents, loving, kind-hearted people who had been her world. They were well off, rich, other people would say, and she had known a life of comfort and happiness as a child. But everything changed one dark night. After sharing a simple dinner together, she went to bed, blissfully unaware that it would be the last time she would see her parents alive. The next morning, she had woken up to find both of them dead, their bodies cold and lifeless. Her father's brother, her uncle, had come forward, appearing the caring family member to take her in. But what no one knew was that he was the one responsible for their deaths. his greed too great to resist the lure of her father's wealth. In a sick twist, he sought not only her parents' riches, but complete control over her inheritance. Chima recounted how he had orchestrated another tragic event that left her paralyzed, further consolidating his power by ensuring she would never pose a threat to him. But that wasn't enough in the sight of her uncle. When she turned 12, her uncle, unable to mask his cruelty any longer, put some drugs into her meal one night that caused her to fall into a deep sleep. When the entire village was asleep, he took her in his arms, walking all the way to the forest where he abandoned her, hoping that the wilderness would end what he had begun. Yet fate had different plans. A hunter from a nearby village stumbled upon her just in time, rescuing her from certain death and raising her as his own daughter. By the time Chima finished, Dave's heart felt as if it's been squeezed tight. He saw in her someone who had endured unimaginable suffering, yet had emerged from it all with her spirit intact. She hadn't let bitterness consume her, and her courage in the face of adversity only deepened his admiration. "Thank you for sharing that with me," he said gently, aware that she had trusted him with a part of her she seldom revealed. For Chima, it was a rare and precious moment. She had never expected to meet someone who would listen without judgment or pity, someone who simply wanted to understand her. Dave's initial attraction to Chima had now transformed into something far deeper. He knew he had found the kind of person he was searching for, a soul unclouded by material desires, who had survived life's hardest trials. From that day onward, Dave and Chima's bond began to grow beyond mere friendship. Dave's visits became a staple in Chima's life, and with every passing day, the marketplace seemed to brighten with his presence by her side. But it wasn't just Dave's charm that drew people to her store. It was his genuine investment in her work and well-being. One morning, Dave arrived earlier than usual, an unusual excitement in his eyes. He stood before Chima's store and announced, "Chima, today I'd like you to teach me how to sell meat." Chima blinked in surprise. "You? Sell meat?" She laughed, convinced he was joking. But as she looked at his face, she realized he was entirely serious. "Yes, I want to learn," he replied, smiling. "If I'm going to be here, I might as well learn something valuable, don't you think?" Chima chuckled, her laughter unguarded for the first time in a long while. She shook her head but agreed, amused by the idea of a foreigner taking on such an everyday task. What followed was an unexpected spectacle. Word spread like wildfire through the market that an American man was selling meat with Chima, and in no time, her store became the busiest in the entire marketplace. Women who had previously made subtle attempts to catch Dave's eyes lined up, eagerly purchasing more than they even needed just to get a glimpse of him helping Chima. Some laughed and whispered, convinced that Dave was a poor traveler down on his luck, while others expressed admiration for his willingness to take on a task that most men would consider beneath them. By noon, their entire stock was sold out completely, leaving Chima in awe. She had never seen such a rush before, and her earnings for the day were double than usual. She turned to Dave, a smile tugging at her lips. "Mr. Man, I think you might be the best meat seller I've ever seen," Chima said, giggling. Dave grinned back, pleased to have brought a bit of joy and prosperity to her life. But beneath his smile, he was contemplating something far more important than just selling meat. He was realizing that he didn't just enjoy spending time with Chima, he cherished her. She had shown him a kindness and resilience that went beyond what he had encountered back home. As they closed the store that evening, Chima looked at him, her expression softening. "Thank you, Dave. I never thought I'd be able to feel like this again." He wanted to tell her he felt the same way, but he held back, afraid that his feelings might overwhelm her. Instead, he took her hand gently. "You're an amazing person, Chima, and I'm grateful to know you." That night, it was clear to both of them that what they shared was no longer just a friendship. They had crossed into something more profound, a love neither had expected but both had hoped for in secret. The bond between Dave and Chima had deepened so much that it was clear to everyone in the village they were more than just friends. Word spread about their closeness, and people began watching their interactions with interest and, in some cases, envy. Dave was known for his kindness and warmth, but no one had expected him to grow so close to the beautiful but disabled woman who sold meat in the market. Then came the day that changed everything. One afternoon, after another busy day at her store, Chima was tidying up, organizing the last few items before preparing to head home. The market was still lively, and people milled about, bargaining and chatting with vendors. Dave had lingered at her store as usual, his presence as comforting to her as the warm sun overhead. As the market buzzed around them, Dave took a deep breath, steadying himself. He felt a mixture of excitement and nerves as he took Chima's hand, guiding her slightly away from the counter. "Chima," he began, his voice carrying a seriousness she had rarely heard from him. She looked at him, curious yet slightly concerned. "What is it, Dave?" Then, to the surprise of everyone in the bustling market, Dave knelt on one knee, right there beside her store. A hush fell over the crowd as they noticed the foreign man kneeling before Chima, their beloved village vendor. Even the merchants, customers, and onlookers paused, watching in awe. If a man kneels down before a lady, it can only mean one thing. "Chima, I came here searching for something real, something true, and I found it in you," he said, his voice strong and filled with emotion. "You are resilient, compassionate, and more beautiful than words can capture. I love you, Chima, and I want to spend the rest of my life by your side. Will you marry me?" Chima's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide with astonishment. She had dreamed of love, but had never thought it would come to her in such a grand, unexpected way. The reality of her physical limitation had always haunted her, leaving her uncertain about her worthiness to be loved. But here was Dave, publicly declaring his love and devotion for her, with no regard for anything else. She finally spoke. "Dave, you know I can't walk. I'm not like other women." Dave reached for her hand, his gaze unwavering. "Chima, that doesn't matter to me. I love you exactly the way you are. You are strong, resilient, and beautiful. You've survived more than anyone should ever have to. Please, let me be part of your life, and let's make something wonderful together." Tears welled in her eyes as she managed to whisper, "Yes, Dave, I'll marry you." The crowd erupted into cheers, and several women nearby wiped tears from their eyes, touched by the moment. The whole village buzzed with the news. Chima, the beautiful yet crippled woman, was engaged to a foreigner who everyone believed was a humble traveler. Though many thought it was an unusual pairing, their love seemed real and true, and that was enough to bring the village together in joy for them. After their modest, heartfelt wedding, Dave and Chima bid farewell to the entire village, thanking everyone for their blessings. They headed to the city, where Dave intended to surprise her with his true identity. When they finally arrived at the sprawling mansion that he had kept hidden from her, Chima was stunned. Marble pillars, sprawling gardens, and luxurious furnishings greeted her as they entered, and her astonishment was palpable. "Dave, it seems we are at the wrong place, oh. Where are we?" Chima asked, her voice almost a whisper as she took in her surroundings. Dave turned to her, taking her hands in his. "Chima, there's something I haven't told you," he began. He explained to her that he was far from the struggling traveler she had taught him to be. He told her about his business, his wealth, and the true purpose of his journey to the village, to find a love that was genuine, a love untainted by material wealth. "I wanted someone who would see me for who I am, and not what I own," he continued. "And you, Chima, you gave me that. You showed me the beauty of life without knowing anything about my wealth, and that's why I chose you." Chima took a moment to process his words, and then her expression softened. "Dave, I don't care about all of this," she said, gesturing to the luxurious home around them. "I love you for the kind, generous man you are, not for any of this." Relieved and deeply touched, Dave hugged her tightly. "Thank you for understanding," he said softly. "Now, Chima, I have one more surprise for you." He explained that he had arranged for her to receive the best medical care available, hoping to help her regain her ability to walk. Though hesitant at first, Chima saw the genuine care in his eyes and agreed, feeling a mixture of hope and trepidation at the prospect of walking again. It was a difficult journey, yes, filled with therapy sessions, surgeries, and challenges that tested Chima's strength and resilience. Yet with Dave by her side, she pushed forward. Her determination to walk again wasn't just for herself, it was for the life they were building together. 1 year later, Chima took her very first steps with the help of her doctors. For Dave, it was one of the most beautiful and emotional moments of his entire life, a testament to Chima's spirit and their shared resolve. She could finally stand beside him, free from the constraints of a wheelchair, and together they planned their return to Makoji. With her newfound mobility, Chima felt as if a part of her had been returned, a part she had thought lost forever. Dave, proud and amazed, planned one final gesture to surprise the people of Makoji, the village that had accepted him as one of their own. A year after they had left, Dave and Chima returned to Makoji. This time, they returned with a plan to surprise the villagers who had come to love them. The two had spent months preparing their return, and Chima was especially excited to see the reaction of her father and those who had known her as the crippled meat vendor. They set up their old store in the market on a bustling morning, just as they had done before. Dave wore a neatly pressed suit, his attire contrasting with the humble clothes he had worn during his previous visits. They positioned themselves at the store, waiting for the village to notice their presence. Slowly, curious whispers began spreading among the villagers. Some wondered if it was indeed Dave, for he was the only white man they had ever seen in the market selling meat. But this time, his clean-cut appearance made them doubt their own eyes. As for Chima, no one recognized her at all. She was standing, radiant and confident, greeting people with a warm smile as they approached the store. People gathered, casting confused glances between the two, whispering among themselves. Some even walked away, shaking their heads in disbelief, convinced that it couldn't be the same Dave and Chima they once knew. Finally, Chima decided it was time for the big reveal. She gestured for everyone to gather close, and when the crowd had grown silent with anticipation, she took out her old wheelchair, setting it beside her as a reminder of the person she had once been. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, she sat in it, just as she used to back in the days when they first met. The crowd gasped, and shock whispers rippled through the market. Some of the women covered their mouths in disbelief as they realized that this was indeed Chima, the woman they had known to be disabled. And then, slowly, Chima rose from the wheelchair, standing tall before them. Her eyes shone with a quiet pride as she looked around, watching the recognition and amazement dawn on their faces. Tears filled the eyes of several women who had known her struggle, and shouts of joy and disbelief echoed around her. Some of the villagers came forward, their hands trembling, asking if it was truly her. Chima nodded, tears glistening in her own eyes, as she hugged the women who had once been her friends and customers. That night, they, with help from Chima's father, organized a grand feast in the village square. The villagers gathered in droves, eager to celebrate the miraculous transformation of their beloved Chima. The air was filled with the smell of roasted meats, fresh fruits, and traditional dishes as musicians played joyful songs that carried through the village. People danced, clapped, and shared stories as they marveled at Chima's strength and resilience. Villagers young and old came forward, telling her how much she had inspired them. Women who had once envied her now held her hands, expressing joy and pride in her journey. And men who had doubted her abilities praised her determination. Dave and Chima stood hand in hand, surrounded by their new family, touched by the love and acceptance of the people. In the eyes of the villagers, Chima had become a symbol of strength, and their marriage a testament to the power of true love and resilience. And as they celebrated beneath the starlit African sky, Dave and Chima knew that they had found a place they could always call home, forever connected to Makoji and its people. The celebration carried on through the night, and as the first light of dawn crept over the village, Dave and Chima felt an overwhelming sense of peace and fulfillment. They had each come to Makoji seeking something. Dave, the sincerity of a love unburdened by wealth, and Chima, a life beyond her limitations. Together, they had found both and so much more. And as they said final farewells to the village that morning, they left knowing that they had touched the hearts of many, leaving behind a legacy of hope, love, and an unbreakable spirit of human resilience. The story of Dave and Chima teaches us that true love and genuine character transcends appearances, wealth, and physical limitations. Dave's journey to find love without the influence of his wealth reveals that material riches can obscure the deeper qualities that create lasting relationships. Chima's resilience, despite her hardships and physical challenges, shows the strength of human spirit and the beauty of a kind, authentic heart. Together, their story reminds us that love rooted in sincerity, selflessness, and shared strength is the most valuable treasure of all. Genuine connections are built not on what one has, but on who one is, and the willingness to stand by each other through life's challenges. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like this. God richly bless you. Catch you in the next video.